and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And I know a lot of you were depressed over the news of the week with Amy Coney Barrett rushed through and sworn in. We're going to talk about what can be done to unpack the courts.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about on that. Meanwhile, Catholics are suing for the right to discriminate in the Supreme Court next week. That's the Fulton versus Philadelphia case. So we'll try to figure out whether the Pope's support for civil unions for gay couples might make a difference in that case.
Speaking of the Pope, he gave Washington, D.C. a relatively gay-friendly Catholic Cardinal. That's in Catholic terms, but Albany lost an anti-gay Episcopal bishop.
Amazing news. A Texas board reversed itself after it had lifted protections for LGBTQ and disabled social work clients, although this may not be the last word on it.
It was whiplash. A trailblazing bi-gender feminist theologian, Virginia Mollenkott, has died at 88.
And Andy is going to review Daedalus. He calls it a visually arresting film centered on a homeless male hustler. So stay tuned to entertainment news for that.
Okay, Amy Coney Barrett. So,
well, before we get to that, can we discuss voting a little? We do have an election coming up next week.
And if you haven't voted, you got to bring it in now or go to the polls.
Well, I'm proudly sporting my I voted sticker. I don't usually display these, but it's such a chore and so important this year. I managed to do it in half an hour at Madison Square Garden earlier this week. But I went in at 7:15 in the morning and was out at 7:45. They have expanded early voting hours in New York, but that's going to end this weekend. And of course, the rules are different from state to state, but it really is too late to mail in ballots anywhere right now. And you really have to either show up in person or drop off an absentee ballot in a drop-off box,
or the Board of Elections, your local Board of Elections.
Board of Elections is another good idea. But you see, just from what happened with the Supreme Court and the Wisconsin case this week, that the Supreme Court really can interfere with the counting of ballots.
They are determined to be part of the coup, the Trump coup, which is to basically say that all these ballots that came in, I mean, Trump openly says it. They're not valid. It's not right. Announce it on election night, which never is done. I mean, most elections aren't certified. I mean, the first state to do it is Delaware, and they don't do it for 2 days anyway. Nobody has to, I mean, we don't elect a new president until the Electoral College meets. I mean, there was one election that wasn't decided until the day before the inauguration.
All this stuff about networks calling elections, first of all, they don't do it on complete counts. They do it on projections and some reports here and there. None of this calling it on election night is traditional. And for Trump to stand up and say that he thinks it's illegal not to call it on election night is he ought to be locked up for that. It's just another example of what a traitor to the country he is.
If all you Trump supporters are waiting until election day, you better pray for nice weather.
And not too much COVID running around, the spiking rates of the virus. It'll be interesting to see how that affects the turnout. But really, there are ways for you to do it without waiting till election day in most places. And I can't emphasize enough. Look, I got a sticker and I got a pen. I got a pen from the Board of Elections. They can't count the votes appropriately or have short enough lines, but they gave me a pen.
We go through this every year. We are a completely screwed up country, and most countries There's only one way to vote. Everybody votes the same way. They get a piece of paper, they mark an X, and it is counted that night in front of everybody, in front of all the parties, and then they can declare a winner generally. Sometimes it's hard to form a government.
Well, then there's Russia, and then there are other countries where the elections are not quite so free and fair.
Well, and we had a bit of a Soviet ballot ourselves. Our assembly member and our state senator didn't even have opponents.
Well, my point being that it's not quite so perfect around the world. But we really have to fight.
I'm saying it's standard. It is standard. We allow every county to decide how you're going to vote and what kind of a machine you're going to vote on. And it's insane. We're not we're a republic. We're not a democracy. So we have to get over all these things so we don't have so much stress.
The point being that this year we have to fight hard to vote and to get those votes counted, because they are not backing down. They are not going away. They are not giving up until the absolute last minute. And they will try everything to take this election.
All right. Shall we talk about the court?
Sure.
So look, I mean, the court hasn't been good.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot one thing. There is a movement across the country to have, I guess, the anti-Trumpists be prepared to protect the election results, to get out on the streets in mass numbers to demand an accurate count and a fair election. And that is being organized at a site called protecttheresults.com. So if you go to that site, you can sign up to receive alerts about what's happening in your area. I've signed up. They're talking about actions possibly Wednesday the 4th, the day after the election next week. But you can stay informed about any mass actions happening in your area in the streets. Protecttheresults.com.
I have it in my book in New York to go to the public library on 42nd Street at 4 o'clock, which I could do after we tape this show. And by that time, the big Supreme Court case on religious freedom to discriminate against gays will have been heard.
And let's not forget that it isn't just the presidency. It is the United States Senate. It is the House, although that feels fairly safe. But it is local state elections. It is state legislatures. All of those are crucially important for many, many reasons, including protecting the presidential vote and redistricting and everything else. Pay attention to your local ballot.
If we don't flip some of these basically Democratic states that are controlled by gerrymandered Republican legislatures, if we don't flip them this year, those same people are going to draw lines for themselves for the next 10 years, as they did after winning the elections in 2010, when we were all asleep. So,
and God help us, they may choose the electors for the election if Trump succeeds in screwing this up enough, and then we're really in trouble.
We really need a better way to elect a president, vice president. In the beginning, it was just every elector was appointed by the legislature, and they got 2 votes, and whoever got the most votes was president, and whoever got the second most was the vice president. That's the way it went for a couple of years. But after that, it's this crazy system. I mean, there is a vote in the states for president, but the states can decide how they want to pick the electors. Anytime they can change it. And, it's insane. We need direct election of the president. Even Nixon was for it.
Okay, now we can move on to the court.
Well, lots of folks were deeply depressed to see this woman, Amy Coney Barrett, sworn in. She got a 52-48 vote. No Democratic votes. 1 Republican vote against her, Susan Collins from Maine.
Who only did that to enhance her own re-election chances in Maine.
She's going to lose. It was the closest vote ever. And it was only the second time that a Supreme Court justice was confirmed without any votes of the opposing party. The first time was Ulysses Grant put up Edwin Stanton to be Supreme Court judge, right? And the South hated him. So all the Democrats voted against him. That was the racist party. And He died before he could get sworn in. But Amy did get sworn in on the balcony, right in front of the White House at a late night ceremony. Nobody wearing a mask, not her. She had COVID. Trump, Clarence Thomas, and the husband. Nobody wore a mask. You're such a great example to the people of this country.
And then I understand she and Trump went up on the balcony to display themselves.
Covito and Covita, they looked like. It was grotesque. Actually, CNN, and Trump was very conscious of this, they didn't cover it. They just went on with what they were discussing and figured they'd get the highlights later. But look, so this depresses people deeply because there's so much that can be decided by this court, and this woman is dedicated. Now, look, all they talked about in the hearings for the Democrats, she's going to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Well, Democrats, how about getting another act in there when you win in January so we don't have to worry about that? She's going to overturn Roe v. Wade. Well, she may, but that means we're going to need laws and things to overcome that. And then the other thing is...
State by state.
Yes, and they talked about same-sex marriage a lot. And there are things they could do to that. And we could get into the nuances of how the Obergefell decision and the Windsor decision could be, weakened. But
well, again, it could be thrown back to a state-by-state system.
Yes,
we won the Lawrence case, which overturned Bowers v. Hardwick. They can overturn Obergefell. They can throw same-sex marriage back to a state-by-state system.
And they can let you ban sodomy again. But the thing is, there are 13 states that still have sodomy laws on the books. They never repealed them, but they're unenforceable. I don't know how many states still have anti-LGBT marriage laws.
They can pass new ones.
I think there are many, but the only one to repeal it after these decisions was Nevada. They repealed their anti-LGBT law. So all the other states have to do that as well. All right, so these things can happen. I hope it gets people mad. But the other thing is being talked about forever, even Joe Biden had to weigh in on it, is, look, let's rebalance the courts. The Republicans have been packing the courts for 40 years. I keep pointing out that I'm 67 years old, and there's never been a Chief Justice appointed by a Democrat in my lifetime. So there it is. It is up to the Congress, solely up to the Congress, to decide how many courts there are, how many districts, how many judges on the Supreme Court. Totally in the power of Congress. It's not in the Constitution. So that can be done if the Democrats have any guts, and they better. And they certainly are talking about it. I mean, Chuck Schumer said everything is on the table. I mean, others have said, you did this to us, don't think we're not going to come back and do so. And it's not doing anything. We're just trying to make the courts fair. Originally, and I didn't realize this, when they started the Supreme Court, they just said, well, let's have 6 Supreme Court justices because there are 6 circuits. We'll take one from each circuit. Well, we're up to 13 circuits now, right? And plus DC. Let's do it that way. But we need 4 new Supreme Court justices, and then Amy Coney Barrett's opinion isn't going to mean anything.
Well, for the moment anyway, depending on who is in charge of the Congress and how this goes beyond that. But
now it's almost Halloween. Should we show them the film and scare the hell out of them?
Well, we'll show them the film. It's a slightly lengthy film. It's about 7.5 minutes, and it stars Aaron Belkin, who used to run the Service Members Defense.
We founded the Palm Center that helped end Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Yes. He worked on the military issue for many years. And when we got rid of the ban on gay people in the military, he moved over, and now he has taken on this court thing along with a number of other people, like Evan Wolfson and Kate Kendall, but a broader swath. And what's good about this video is he goes into the deeper complexities of these issues and about the fact that there is minority rule in the United States, including the fact that the Senate majority that represents a very small amount of the population, because you have 2 senators from South Dakota, 2 senators from California, 2 senators from North Dakota, 2 senators from New York, it is completely imbalanced. So he's talking about a very fundamental rethinking of the way the country is structured. Now, there are a few moments here where for those of you listening on a podcast, it goes silent because they're putting writing on the screen, but you're not missing anything by missing that. And his sound will come back almost immediately.
It's very compelling. We give you Aaron Belkin.
When the court was arguably stolen in 2016 because President Obama had an open vacancy to fill and the Senate would not let him fill that vacancy, which had never happened in American history.
So I was shocked that former President Obama left so many vacancies and didn't try to fill those positions.
I'll tell you why. I was in charge of what we did the last 2 years of the Obama administration.
I will give you full credit for that.
There was also a confluence of things coming together for the first time in American history that amplified my small f fear into kind of capital P panic. So it was one, the sense that the court had been taken and would not become a liberal court possibly for a generation just based on the demographics of the judges, the justices. The second thing is that the scope of planetary emergencies we face, I would argue, has never been larger because there's effectively no time left on the climate change clock. And the data show that even before the court was arguably stolen, the court has been behaving in very partisan ways. It's an extremely conservative court going back 25 years. Just Roberts himself, at his confirmation hearing, he was asked, is Roe v. Wade settled law? In other words, is the law protecting the right to abortion settled? And are you going to try to unsettle it? And he said, no, that's settled law. But when you look at his record, once he became Chief Justice, in all 6 cases he's heard dealing with abortion, he's voted against women's rights 6 times, 100% of the times. If the court is frankly a shill for GOP donors, what that means is that the court is not going to allow the next Congress and president to solve climate change, because no matter what kind of bill comes out of Congress, the court's going to strike it down. The court is not going to allow the next president and Congress to solve gun violence, because no matter what kind of bill comes out of Congress, the court's going to strike it down. The same goes for immigration. The same goes for economic inequality, for hyper-incarceration. This is a very conservative court that votes in the direction favored by Republican donors. So you have all of a sudden a confluence of a stolen court, and then you have a confluence of a partisan court that will not let Congress solve planetary emergencies. And then the third piece of this is that the court itself has been implicated in the compromising of democracy. The court has arguably allowed the Republican Party to consolidate minority rule by, for example, allowing unlimited dark money to flood our politics and Citizens United, destroying campaign finance, the decisions that go back a generation, by dismantling the Voting Rights Act. So we had an act that was supported by almost every single member of Congress, Democratic and Republican, that disallowed voter suppression, and the Supreme Court got rid of it. And now millions of black and brown votes are suppressed every electoral cycle by putting its stamp of approval on hyper-partisan gerrymandering. So the court itself is implicated in the erosion of democracy. They need to get rid of the filibuster in the Senate and other Senate rules that prevent majority rule, because if they don't get rid of the filibuster, they'll never be able to pass any laws, including a court expansion bill. Then they need to expand the court. And then they need to pass a very aggressive version of a bill called H.R. 1, which is a bill that bans voter suppression and gerrymandering and dark money. But an aggressive version of that, offering statehood to D.C. and Puerto Rico, allowing immediate citizenship for law-abiding immigrants, providing automatic right to vote. The Brennan Center says that if you do that, you add 40 million voters to the rolls. The problem is that if you do any 2 of those steps, everything will fall apart. If you just get rid of the filibuster and unrig the system with an aggressive H.R. 1, banning voter suppression, gerrymandering, and dark money, what's going to happen? the court's going to strike down H.R. 1. The conservative majority has already proven that it's hostile to democratic revitalization. So the point of judicial reform and expanding the courts is not just the courts, but the point is that the system has been, no democracy should tolerate voter suppression and untraceable dark money. It's ridiculous. So if you want to unrig the system, you have to expand the courts. At the state level, which is often the laboratory for them, they've already stolen 2 courts through court packing in Georgia and Arizona. In fact, the idea of court expansion was the head of the Federalist Society, the Republican Judicial Reform Organization, who wrote a paper urging court expansion a couple of years ago when they thought they would need to expand the courts in order to preserve their control over it.
They want to pack the court. You know what that means? They want to put on a lot of justices. These are things that are just horrible. I guess we could do that too, right? We could do that too.
Demographically, it's just going to get harder and harder for the Democrats to take the majority control of the Senate unless the system is unrigged and those 40 million voters are added to the rolls and statehood is granted to D.C. and Puerto Rico. Because just the way the Senate math works, a tiny slice of the population living in a large number of states is able to consolidate majority control of the Senate, which is what is happening now. Demographers are predicting that it's going to be less and less and less and less likely for Democrats to get majority control of the Senate moving forward. I don't think there's a bipartisan solution to any of this because, my analysis, which you could absolutely disagree with, but my analysis is that what we're seeing across the range of policy issues, the gaslighting, the lying, the extreme policy positions, the allowing Russia to influence our election, all of it. It is a function of a ruthless partisan power grab of a party that knows that it is slipping into the minority because it is catering mostly to white people, and that can't win unless it cheats. And so there is zero incentive for the Republicans to de-radicalize or to compromise on any of this. They have consolidated control over the levers of power. We think that we can solve our problems at the ballot box, and we think the key to solving our problems is getting Trump out of office. So, of course, getting Trump out of office is important because he's reactive and his reactive personality is dangerous. But even if he is thrown out of office via impeachment and or at the ballot box, that doesn't mean that the Democrats are going to be allowed to govern. And when one party is not allowed to govern, even when it wins elections, that's not democracy. That's single party rule.
So, does that impel you to go to the polls?
Yes, certainly. Yes, but it shows that we need a whole new system. And the fact is, again, court change is not a radical thing. It's done periodically. They haven't expanded the federal court since the Carter administration. The country has grown quite a bit since then. So it can be done. But now you've got this woman on the court who can't even say that Social Security is constitutional. She can't even say whether voter intimidation is wrong. She's something.
If you want to take a closer look at that video and the issues and the people working on it, you can go to takebackthecourt.today. Takebackthecourt.today. And you'll find all that material in the organization.
Right. So the big, we're all getting ready for election day, and as we should, but on that next day, November 4th, the Supreme Court, and we had James Essex on to talk about this, is going to hear Fulton v. Philadelphia. This is Catholic Social Services of Philadelphia says, we don't want to give adoptive and foster care children to gay couples. We only want to give them to Catholic married heterosexual couples or maybe single people if they're not gay. So Philadelphia says, well, we've got an anti-discrimination law. If you want to do that, go ahead and do that. But you can't get city money from us to do a service for children if you're going to discriminate. And that's what's going to be before the court. But
because they do get city money, and the city took it away, and the agency went to court and lost, and the city won. But this has been appealed all the way up, and now the Supreme Court is going to hear the appeal from the case that the agency lost about getting city money.
So I wondered if the Pope's comments, which we talked about last week and don't think very much of, because, I mean, if he wanted to clarify them, he could, and he hasn't. But in this documentary, using some old clips, we have him saying that we gay people have a right to a family. And he endorsed the idea of civil unions. So I called both sides involved with the Fulton v. Philadelphia case and said, does this make any difference? And the Beckett Fund for Religious Liberty, a right-wing group that's representing Sharon L. Fulton, said it's not a teaching church document. And then the Archdiocese of Milwaukee is in the case. They said the Pope's comments have no impact. The court, and listen to this, the court is not free to inquire whether a person's position is theologically correct or sanctioned by some religious authority. So, yeah, in other words, it can spring for your mind, whatever you want to believe, and then you invoke it, and I don't have to follow the civil rights laws if I believe that.
Well, we've always said that, and we have fantasized about starting our own religions and claiming our own religious beliefs to do things, but that's on the level of fantasy. The Catholic Church is a lot more entrenched. And since there, should I suggest that with 6 Catholics on the Supreme Court, most of whom are among the right-wing bloc, things are not looking good in this case?
Well, I mean, my friend Bernard Lynch, Catholic priest and theologian, said it could lead to Sharia law. And Evan Wolfson said, you can't have law where everybody gets to impose their own religious beliefs or beliefs cloaked in religion as a special exemption from following the law. And, I don't know if you want me to read the Scalia quote, on the chopping block in this case is a very good 1990 decision. I remember when it came out. It's about a Native American who wanted to ingest peyote because he said it's part of my religion. And they said, you're fired and you can't get unemployment benefits because you did something wrong. You broke the drug laws. He sued. I thought, oh, they're not being very nice to the Native American. But Justice Scalia said, this is a generally applicable law. It's not targeting Native Americans. It's an anti-drug law. He said, if we go ahead and give them the unemployment benefit, that would open the prospect of constitutionally required religious exemptions from civic obligations of almost every conceivable kind, from military service to payment of taxes to health and safety regs, such as manslaughter and child neglect laws, compulsory vaccination laws, drug laws, traffic laws, and laws providing equality of opportunity for the races. Imagine. Scalia threw that in. So yes, this is what this is about. Can we have law in this country, or is everybody going to make up their own based on their beliefs?
Well, and that's where you run into the problem of this freedom of religion in the First Amendment to the Constitution, and the right wing uses that as a constitutional principle to rely on. And where do you draw the line?
Well, I don't know where they're going to go in the case. I mean, there's lots of different ways that they could go, but it makes me nervous.
By the way, yes, we have talked about the documentary about the Pope, where he's quoted as supporting legal protection for same-sex families as civil unions, not marriage. Well, there was another report this week of something else that he had said in that interview a year and a half ago that was not used in the documentary, where he said, right after he supported legalizing civil unions, that does not mean approving of homosexual acts, not in the least. So for those of you who think he's our friend, you might want to rethink that.
And the Archbishop of San Francisco said, I talked to him back in January, and that's not what he meant anyway. And of course, he's being condemned by conservative Catholic leaders for this. And Franklin Graham, who said that this would Jesus will have died for nothing if this stands.
What, civil unions?
Yes.
Well, Franklin Graham has already been rejected by one member of his family who's voting for Biden. So another young woman. They're forming a cadre, I think, the young women.
Shall we get to some Trump news?
Sure.
A federal judge in Massachusetts issued a preliminary injunction and stay against Ben Carson's HUD overhaul of protections in fair housing that cover a variety of things, so that's a plus.
We have moments of surcease. The State Department, shocking, has canceled its appeals of 2 court decisions that legalized the U.S. citizenship of children born to same-sex couples, where one member of the couple is not a U.S. citizen, although the couples are married. The State Department had been fighting the kids' citizenship. The courts ruled in favor of the families, and the State Department has now given up appealing those decisions. I can't imagine why.
I think the president said everybody's got to be focused on stealing the election, and we can't be doing these other things.
Well, just to maintain his bona fides for his ultimate Senate or presidential run, Secretary of State Pompeo wants the following groups: Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, Oxfam, and others designated as anti-Semitic.
Well, he's also...
Because they support the rights of Palestinians.
Yeah.
They're not agreeing with him that they're anti-Semitic.
He has also suspended all diversity training as of October 23rd under the executive order from Trump that forbids teaching by federal agencies of divisive concepts, including that the U.S. is fundamentally racist or sexist. No, the Trump administration is fundamentally racist.
I just want to make
sure. Judges. I mean, do you know how many? I mean, it's almost all white men. Almost all white men. Don't let Amy Coney Barrett fool you.
I just want to make sure the Biden team is keeping a list of all these things so they can overturn all of them if they should assume.
And Pompeo has great aid from U.S. Christian right groups with close ties to the Trump administration. They spent $280 million in dark money, meaning we don't know who gave this money, to fuel campaigns on 5 continents against women, against LGBT people. And the groups include Franklin Graham's Focus on the Family, Federalist Society. They're working against same-sex marriage.
Well, we've talked about this for years. This is not new, but the Open Democracy has written a report that gives a lot more details. I think that's an undercount, by the way, that spending. But if you go to opendemocracy.net, you can see the whole list of the right-wing Christian organizations and the amounts they have spent in foreign countries against our humanity.
Now, any Catholic bishop, by our standards, is going to be conservative, but the Pope has tried to move the needle a little bit with people who are a little more pastoral and open and don't snarl at us. So he made Archbishop Wilton Gregory a cardinal, the first Black cardinal in the United States. New Ways Ministry said he's one of the few willing to offer affirming messages to the LGBT community. They also praised the guy appointed in Malta. But Gregory has dialogue with groups like Fortunate Families, which are Catholic parents of LGBT kids. And in Atlanta, he opened up the churches to ministries to LGBT people that weren't all about, stop being gay. And he called for, when the Obergefell decision was coming down, he said, look, we may not agree with it, but everybody please be civil about it. And he supported a veto in Georgia of a right-wing religious freedom bill. Remember when we fought that in Georgia?
Yes,
he supported the veto of that.
I call him pro-gay-ish.
Well, exactly. I mean, he was the bishop. He was the head of the Catholic bishops back in the 90s when I covered the abuse scandal down in Dallas when they all met. There were 700 press there. And he provided some good leadership on that in terms of overcoming this abuse. And he wanted bishops to go to jail if they covered it up.
Meanwhile, some bad leadership in the Episcopal Church is crashing. Albany, New York, Episcopal Bishop Bill Love, inaptly named, has agreed to resign his position with the church. He told Episcopal clergy not to perform same-sex marriages.
Yeah, the conference of the Episcopalians said, look, nobody has to do them if they don't want to, but they have to be available in your diocese, and the people who want to do them have to be able to do them. And he said, no.
All right. Good news from Texas. Well, we have several pieces of news from Texas. But the good news is that the Behavioral Health Executive Council, which at the governor's suggestion had canceled non-discrimination protections for social workers seeing clients, has restored those non-discrimination rules. They covered sexual orientation and disability and gender identity. So they're back in place, even though the governor said, well, they're not covered in state law and therefore they shouldn't be covered in these rules. But they're still...
People with disabilities are covered under the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. And we're covered by the Bostock decision, or maybe not with this new court.
And they're going to still investigate the details of this to decide where they end up. But at the moment, the rules are back in effect and social workers are not allowed to discriminate.
But the reversal was unanimous, and the original imposition, bad decision, was unanimous. All right. We got kind of, well, let's, should we talk about some of the people we lost?
Sure.
I have those. The first one is Virginia Mollenkott, feminist theologian. She's died at the age of 88. She wrote on feminist and gay spirituality. She said, this is back in the 70s, the character of Adam, the character of the Bible, was male and female before he got lonely. And she remained an evangelical. But she wrote a book called Is the Homosexual My Neighbor? And a lot of people told her that gay Christians said, that book is the reason I didn't take my own life. So
he wrote that book in 1978. It was a landmark and is still a much honored text. She said, and she was considered a very prominent theologian, that the Bible argues for wiping out categories of race, class, and gender. Far from being a right-wing publication, she says the Bible, in fact, supports a much more holistic view of humanity. Right. She had, when she was 11 years old, she had an affair with a 21-year-old woman. Her parents basically kicked her out. She ended up, and they sent her to Bob.
You can't blame them for objecting.
They ended up sending her to Bob Jones University, where she was told to marry a man to recapture her, I don't know.
And she did.
Standing. She did.
Had kids, or certainly had a son.
She wrote 13 books. She was a professor. She had a partner of 17 years that she married in 2013, Susanna Tilton, who died in 2018. She said she got a lot of death threats, and she said, there are some things worth dying for. She described herself as bi-gender, as encompassing both male and female genders. She received a Lifetime Achievement Award from SAGE. One of her books received a Lambda Literary Award for Best Transgender Book of the Year. She was a giant.
I remember her from the 70s, because don't forget, I was a gay Catholic then. We had John McNeil, and the evangelicals had Virginia Mollenkott, and everybody quoted her in those days. And I love what she said. She invoked the phrase of John Keats called sympathetic imagination, the ability to imagine what someone else is feeling. That's the basis, she said, for all morality.
And does that segue us to the amazing Randi?
Yes. James Randi was 92. He did magic on Wonderama when I was even younger, a kid in the 60s. But he was also dedicated to debunking paranormal occurrences through his Committee for Skeptical Inquiry. He went after faith healers because they were charlatans. He came out publicly later in life, and he is survived by his husband, Deyvi, Davy Pena.
Again, an amazing figure known as the Amazing Randy, a great favorite on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. He'd go on there and debunk people, and he had a huge career as a truth teller.
He said there's no such thing as magic.
And then there's Frederick Weston, who died at 74 of cancer. He was a long-time AIDS survivor.
Artist, poet, performer. He was a beloved member of the Visual AIDS Archive Project.
Yeah. He has an upcoming memorial, Frederick Weston, and an upcoming exhibit, and there will be a memorial to his life. Wonderful artist. So Frederick Weston, another big loss at 74. Keep your eye out for his exhibit and memorial.
All right. In Texas, a horror in Waco, a 17-year-old male, Demarion DeGreat, was charged with murder. He was luring gay men on Grindr and shooting them, wounding 2 on August 17th and killing 1. We have a picture of Jonathan Breeding, 23 years old. So this guy, the perpetrator, alleged, was arrested first on the first 2, but they let him go. They said they didn't have enough evidence, and he was rearrested for the murder on October 12th.
Terrible.
In Salt Lake City, Adam Atwood, 34, brutally beat and raped a lesbian. He was charged on 7 first-degree felony charges, and he'd been in jail on a $150,000 bond since March. And Judge Christine Johnson came in and ordered his release on October 19th and waived his bail. His motive, he was going to fix the gay. His wife and kids were in the house at the time.
Any other violence stories?
No.
All right, a good news story from Texas. In Austin, where a young trans teen, Beatrix Jackman, has become one of the first girls to achieve Eagle Scout status. She did a service project for PFLAG, where she went around to local businesses and organizations and assembled materials for self-care kits that she handed out to LGBTQ people and families, and she is now officially an Eagle Scout.
Tuesday, we missed it, was Intersex Awareness Day, and in New York, City Council member Danny Drum introduced legislation to require the health department to create an intersex inclusive outreach campaign to educate doctors and parents and everybody so that you don't, do these unnecessary procedures.
And in San Francisco, the Board of Supervisors is moving forward the attempt to make the Phyllis Lyon Del Martin House an historic landmark. They okayed a resolution to nominate the house for that honor. They're trying to save it from being knocked down and having the land developed. Valuable piece of land, but we got to preserve some history here.
A new survey from the American Values Survey that said support for same-sex marriage is up to 70%, 7-0, with 28% opposed, even 50% of Republicans support. The numbers are kind of flipped on the Supreme Court in terms of support.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't think that will protect the Supreme Court from delegalizing it.
Citibank is going to let trans and non-binary customers use your chosen names on your credit cards.
I should hope so.
International news? No?
Yes. In Nepal, trans activists want a repeal of the third gender designation. They say it gives them unequal rights in marriage, education, citizenship, and property. I remember a few years ago when we were celebrating the acknowledgement of trans people in this third gender designation, but now they're sick of it. They're evolving and they don't want it anymore.
Well, in France, they're sick of hate, and they've unveiled a national plan to combat hatred and discrimination against LGBT people in the home, in the school, in the university, work, healthcare, and sport. It's a 3-year plan, and they were also opposing conversion therapy, and their emphasis is on education in childhood. You have to be taught.
In Estonia, the parliament is going to debate a proposal to legalize same-sex marriage. The Green Party submitted petitions with 14,500 signatures. This is in advance of a referendum that's scheduled for next year that would declare man-woman marriage only legal. So if the parliament legalizes it before the referendum, I'm not quite sure which one will take precedence.
United Kingdom is adding LGBT questions to the census for the first time. It's voluntary for people 16 and over. Scotland is doing it too. They're part of the United Kingdom, but they all have separate censuses. You get a £1,000 fine if you don't complete it.
In Northern Ireland, as of December 7th, same-sex couples can convert their civil partnerships to marriage, and opposite-sex couples can convert their marriages to civil partnerships if they wish.
In Chile, a Senate committee approved marriage equality. It was introduced in 2017. There were 27 friendly and unfriendly amendments to get through before they pass it.
In Venezuela, President Maduro, hated by Trump, has taken the Pope at his word and is going to ask the National Assembly to discuss same-sex marriage legalization. And in Albania, a non-governmental organization, Pink Embassy, has formally requested marriage and adoption rights for same-sex couples.
In Sri Lanka, they're using forced anal probes in prosecution of homosexuality. I don't know what they expect to find in there. They are also doing vaginal probes of suspected lesbians. Again, I don't know what's going on. And giving HIV tests without consent. Human Rights Watch, which Pompeo hates, is protesting.
And a little zoo drama in the Netherlands where a gay male penguin couple has stolen a nest from a lesbian penguin couple with eggs in it. Now, they had previously, the gay male penguin couple, stolen another egg, but they failed to hatch it. And there is fear that the lesbians' eggs are not fertilized, but there is war among penguins in the Netherlands.
We're not the only troubled species. In Denmark, they're looking to criminalize hate speech on the basis of gender identity, gender expression, and sex characteristics. In Jamaica, the conservative newspaper, the Jamaica Observer, there said it's time to get rid of the buggery laws. That's good. In Poland, the leader there threatened to veto the European Union COVID recovery plan if they don't stop blackmailing them over their homophobia. By the way, the president of Poland came down with COVID. In Ireland, the Catholic Archbishop, Diarmuid Martin, responded to the Pope's comments supporting civil unions, saying, the church's attitude has made the life of LGBT people miserable. And we bear a lot of responsibility for that. And so let's see where they go.
Well, things have improved a lot for gay people in Ireland over the last few years, including the legalization of same-sex marriage through the public referendum.
Yep. And Poland's constitutional court banned all abortion, and this has sparked nationwide protests. Get ready for that in the United States.
Exactly. All right. Do you have any specifically AIDS news?
I don't.
All right. Well, let's move on to entertainment news.
We have 9 minutes.
I have railed against the current and even previous manifestations of Saturday Night Live on this show because I find it unfunny and uncreative and unsmart. But this last weekend with Adele as the host was really terrific. She was amazingly good and managed to get in a little singing in a Bachelor takeoff. And she was just great. And it just elevated the show terrifically. It even led me to rewatch the James Corden Carpool Karaoke with her, which is well worth a watch. She's funny, smart, and of course, a tremendous singer.
Love Adele.
And she looks good with the huge weight loss, although I talked to someone this weekend who think she looked better before her weight loss. I think she looks great either way.
And I hope I can lose some after the election. By the way, I worked as a page at NBC on the first season of Saturday Night Live, and everybody has this romance about it, but there were plenty of bad shows then as well. Mm-hmm. All right, so I saw this movie that's streaming now on Apple, Amazon, and Canopy, and it's called Daedalus. It was originally a short film called Daddy from Jonah Greenstein, and from 2018, they use an amateur actor named Alexander Horner as a homeless hustler, and he has both affairs and paid encounters with various men. And it's so real. It's not very much of a narrative film, but it's beautifully shot, and it's bookended by a story in Iowa of a woman being, well, I want to say raped in the beginning, and a story at the end about an old man who's being shunted off to his sister. So it's I thought it was kind of arresting. There's lots of sex, but it's not meant to be titillating. You really feel for the people in the film, Daedalus. I'll send a link out to it in our email.
And I see that one of your favorite Broadway musicals of the last couple of years is finally coming to Netflix in December, and that is the Ryan Murphy version of The Prom, starring Meryl Streep, Nicole Kidman, James Corden, Kerry Washington, Keegan Marshall Key, Andrew Rannells. These, of course, are the Broadway stars who come to the small town to support the lesbian at her prom.
I did love the show. I'm upset that they're not using the Broadway cast. I worry about what Ryan Murphy might do to it. These are all wonderful performers. I don't think James Corden should be taking the big gay role in this.
Why not? Oh, because he's not.
He's not, right. And
sorry, I lost track.
I'm sorry, I'm mispronouncing his name, was terrific on Broadway. He was just terrific. Anyway, I also watched Undoing on HBO. It's very pulpy thriller with Nicole Kidman and Hugh Grant set in wealthy New York. She's a therapist, though, and she has a session with a gay couple in the first episode, but that's really not what it's all about. But I like when it's just integrated like that.
Yeah, I think we're seeing that almost everywhere these days. A little less easily integrated, Gloria Estefan talking with her daughter Emily about Emily's coming out as a lesbian. Emily is 25 and reports that her mother's first reaction was not so positive, and that her mom said, "Don't tell grandma, it'll kill her."
Well, one of the things I read, though, about this was that at one point she talked to her daughter and she said, "Whatever you are, basically, I'm there for you." And the daughter, the daughter said,
I know, I'm not ready. I think Gloria's sugarcoating some of this, but they're happy now. Emily is out. They're doing great, so good.
We all sugarcoat our stories. The right wing spent $17 million sugarcoating the story of Amy Coney Barrett. All those ads that you saw for her saying how perfect and wonderful she was.
Well, I'm also happy to see that our newly out Niecy Nash, who married her girlfriend just a few months ago, is now going to make a pilot for a daytime talk show. There are certainly plenty of daytime talk shows, and much as I like someone like Drew Barrymore, I really don't see the point, although I haven't watched the show. Any of you who have seen it and like it can disabuse me of my cynicism. But Niecy Nash, I'd watch her read the phone book, so I'm happy to hear that news because I think she could be quite interesting and charming. I also have a little breaking news.
Yes.
Mark Siegel and the Philadelphia have done an interview with Joe Biden, which will be released this evening on their website at Philadelphia Gay News.
If we get it in time, I will send it out with the email.
Well, I asked Mark whether he had any headlines from it that we could use to tease the interview. He said Biden touches on using sanctions for nations that use violence against their LGBT communities. Talks about religious freedom versus LGBT rights, and panic defenses. So that's hot off the presses, Joe Biden and the Philadelphia Gay News.
Mark makes it a point of honor to get interviews with presidential candidates. I don't believe Trump spoke to him, but he would really press them, and he would get very upset with them if they didn't talk to him for his paper.
And some of them have been quite reluctant over the years.
Yeah.
He hasn't mentioned it. So I assume that Biden, I don't know what his journey has been getting Biden to talk to him, but if you want to read it.
Mark is a Stonewall veteran, and he was in Gay Youth of New York at the time, and he is going to be portrayed as a character in the HBO Max series on the early gay
equality
gay movement. I think so. Yes. He's being portrayed when he's 18. He still looks pretty young. But,
don't we all?
Well,
we'd like to think so.
I have got to lose some weight when this is all over. It's just been, I've been eating the carbs. I've been, comforting myself with them during this very stressful time.
Whatever.
Anyway, we have 2.5 minutes. How are you, Ann? I miss you.
Well, I'm feeling very nervous about this election. I know the polls are all headed in the right direction, but too many of those swing states are too close for me to feel comfortable. A lot of those states are 1 point, 2 points, and I think historically the conservative vote has been undercounted. Then we have all the shenanigans that Trump is going to pull. He's not going to go down easily, and he's going to fight tooth and nail to discount any votes that are against him. And so I am nervous about this election. I'm not like 4 years ago where I knew he was going to win, which, by the way, I feel a little guilty about because, in fact, he didn't win, but he took it. But I am nervous. I am nervous about this, and I'm nervous about the Senate races. And I really, really want to encourage people not to get complacent about this, no matter what you're hearing about polls.
We hope there will be some nice surprises for you in the wake of the election. And we won't know right away if all the people that have been, we're going to do the show the next day. We're not going to know right away who a lot of races have gone to because there are so many absentee ballots, but that's fine. We're patient. The new Senate and House don't get seated until early January. The president doesn't get seated until January 20th at noon. Sworn in.
Yes, and our plan is to be here every week, so we'll keep track of things as they go along. But I'm not enjoying this period of build-up to this election day. Well,
we are nervous. We do appreciate the notes of support that you've been sending us and the notes of appreciation, and we really are appreciative of that. We don't always know who's listening to what we're talking about, and it's very, very helpful to hear from you. And if you want to be on our email list, go to gayusatv.org, and you can get on the list.
Well, I'm appreciative of all the work that all of you are doing around the country. I'm appreciative of my Reclaim Pride and Rise and Resist colleagues who
10 seconds.
who are doing protecttheresults.com. Go there, protecttheresults.com. We will see you next week.
After the election.